right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's presentation all about NMDA's Healthy Soil Program, specifically how eligible entities within the state can apply for a grant to improve their soil health. My name is Katie Getz, and along with Dean Bruce, I am the co-lead for NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. We want you to feel welcome and feel comfortable as you'll be with us for the next 90 minutes or so, going over how to apply for a grant in this funding cycle. So a bit of housekeeping to get us started. We are recording today's webinar. So if you're having a bit of late lunch, you might want to turn your camera off since that might appear in the final recording. That recording will be posted on our Healthy Soil Program website, and it will also be shared out via our Healthy Soil Program e-newsletter. If you've not subscribed to that newsletter, make sure you go back to the Healthy Soil Program website, scroll all the way to the bottom and input your information there. We'll show you that website toward the end of today's presentation. Another bit of housekeeping, and this is important for a good quality recording. We ask that if you're not speaking, that you keep your microphone muted, especially as Dean and I explained the application process for the bulk of today's presentation. Of course, we welcome your questions. So as we're talking today, please type those in the chat as they occur to you. It's possible Dean and I will answer those in a forthcoming slide. After the presentation, we'll welcome your questions in a couple of different ways. You can either continue to key them in the chat box, or you can use that raise hand feature to ask a question out loud. We'll invite you to unmute and you can ask it out loud. So you want to pay attention for those specific tools that are encircled in red for you at the bottom of your screen. Just a quick agenda to prime the pump today. We're going to hear from the New Mexico Secretary of Agriculture, Jeff Whitty. He's on for today's call. We'll go over some basic qualifications for putting forward a good project as an eligible entity. We'll watch a video so that you have a visual sense of one successful project from a previous funding cycle. And then we'll turn our focus to the particular steps that you at your own eligible entity will want to follow in order to submit your own successful project idea. We'll walk you through the application documents, and then we'll wrap up, as I said, with a bit of Q&A before adjourning for the day. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Secretary of Agriculture, Jeff Whitty. Jeff?
Hey, thanks, Katie. And I'm just curious, I'm reading the chat, and there's a couple of folks that are not within the NMDA system that is saying that the screen is very blurry on their end. So what I'm wondering is if the intranet at NMDA is seeing it clearly and the people outside of our system are seeing it blurry.
Thanks for that. Let me check on that, Jeff, while you continue to speak. Hopefully your audio is coming clear.
So hello, everybody. As Katie said, I'm Jeff Whitty, and I do serve as Secretary of Agriculture, and I am not an IT expert, so I could not tell anybody, although I do try to fake like I'm an IT expert at times, but I couldn't tell anybody how to fix a blurry screen. So hopefully we can get the pros looking into that issue as well. I want to welcome everybody to this seminar today, this afternoon. I think this is one of the most impressive new programs that the state of New Mexico has created in the last few years. And it couldn't have come at a more opportune time. Not only are we better recognizing the impacts and the effects of a better soil system in our agricultural and ranching environments, but when we're dealing with prolonged drought, and in New Mexico, I think our whole life is a drought. We have learned how to live on minimal water over the years. And then you enter a program like this, and I tell people, we've been in a period over the last 7 or 8, 10, 11 years that's been drier than we were during the Dust Bowl. But yet we haven't had those impactful Dust Bowl type events because over the years we have learned to how to better protect and better utilize the soil and to make the soil better and in our farming and ranching practices. The Healthy Soil Program is designed to enhance that even more. Last year, we had massive wildfires across the state. We burned over 1 million acres. We went from the driest state in the nation to the wettest state in the nation in a matter of months. August and September, we were the wettest state in the nation, according to the Weather Service measurement folks. We had to deal with floods on top of the fires because of the fires. The lessons learned just show us how important these healthy soil programs can be, and the lessons that we all learn from each other in these projects. When you think about the New Mexico Healthy Soil Program, the statute says it very clearly. The purpose of the program is to promote and support farming and ranching systems and other forms of land management that increase soil organic matter, aggregate stability, microbiology, and water retention to improve the health, yield, and profitability of the soils in the state. And Katie and Dean will be talking about the eligible entities who can apply for the funding and who have to, the funding has to go through. It's a great system to get, in my leadership here at the Department of Agriculture, I've always pushed programs on the ground, boots on the ground type programs. Healthy Soil is the perfect program to do just that. And the projects that we've had over the years have been a great testament to getting boots on the ground and projects that others can learn from. So I encourage everybody, all the eligible entities, to take advantage of this. Today, we've been in meetings and discussing the Healthy Soil Program. As you know, part of the Healthy Food Initiative that came from the governor's office and through the legislature, that combined with our normal healthy soil appropriation that we have in our base budget, this year we're going to be awarding $1 million in healthy soil grants. And you'll get the details on those from Katie and Dean here in a few. But the state of New Mexico is making a commitment to this program. And I know each of you are just as committed. So I look forward to reviewing and seeing the proposals for this year. These are exciting times, and I can tell you it's your efforts on the ground that are going to keep this thing successful. So thank you for participating today, and thank you for coming up with some really good healthy soil programs that we can continue advancing New Mexico on. So with that, Katie, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Secretary Woody. Really appreciate you joining us this afternoon for a few minutes of a busy day's schedule. As you heard Secretary Woody mention, we are here today to discuss the particulars of eligible entities applying for a grant. So let me just walk you through a few basic qualifications. This screen really illustrates that we have two applicant types from whom we welcome applications for funding here at NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. If you'll look with me on the left side of the screen, that green square, today's presentation is specifically for eligible entities, and those are defined for us within the Healthy Soil Act. Pretty simply, those are local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. It's a mouthful, but the statute goes further by offering us examples of what those parties are. So those are pueblos, tribes, and nations. Acequias also qualify as eligible entities, as do land grants, the state soil and water conservation districts, and within NMSU, the Cooperative Extension Service. Further, we welcome applications from other local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. So we offer this one example of an irrigation district that applied for funding and received it in this current funding cycle. So if you're not here today on behalf of a local governmental entity that has some relationship to land management capacity in New Mexico, chances are you're on the other side of the screen. I'll come to that in just a moment. If you've been plugged in with our website and our e-newsletter, you know that we launched our application period for eligible entities 1 week ago today. We are announcing that you can apply for funding per project of up to $100,000, again, if you are an eligible entity. Now, shifting our focus to the right-hand side of the screen, The other applicant type we welcome applications from is our individual applicants. And it's a pretty encompassing term. So who we look for applications from through this portal are individuals, businesses, and nonprofits in New Mexico that are directly engaged in farming, ranching, or another form of land management. So we represent our two different applicant types with two different pictures here, as you can see. The thing to know, if you are here as an individual, as a business, as a nonprofit, you're not here as an eligible entity. The thing for you to know as an individual applicant is that our application window for you closes this Friday at noon. And we will not accept from any of our applicant types late or incomplete applications. So what we really want to encourage from our individual applicants is that you take a peek at our website. If you've not begun any of the application requirements in pursuit of grant funding, there's another avenue for you to participate in the program, and it's highlighted for you there at the bottom of the screen. We call it our conservation planning opportunity. And what that does, it's not a funding type program, but what it does is it allows you to participate by linking you up with a conservation planner who will work with you during this coming fiscal year to get a conservation plan in place so that this time next year, you can come back to the Healthy Soil Program and make application for grant funding. So again, if you're here as an individual applicant, and this is the first you're hearing of the program, really encourage you to visit our website and check out that conservation planning opportunity. Again, the application deadline is this Friday at noon. But again, our focus here today is on those eligible entities. So pueblos, tribes and nations, acequias, land grants, the district's extension, those other local governmental bodies. Today's presentation is for you. So a question, where can projects happen? If we're soliciting Healthy Soil Program dollars, where can I put a good project on the ground? It's a pretty encompassing list, as you can see on the screen. So we see a lot of projects occur on cropland, on rangeland, forest land, orchards. We even welcome applications occurring on gardens. So what you'll need to establish within your application is that there's some existing relationship between your eligible entity and the land where you intend for the project to occur. And that relationship could take a number of different forms. Perhaps it's ownership. It might be land that the eligible entity leases. It might be land that the eligible entity advises others on. So for instance, if you work at a local governmental entity and you don't own the land, but you're in good partnership with the local landowners, certainly you could put together a project for funding consideration under the Healthy Soil Program. So long story short, if you don't own the land as the eligible entity, all we ask of you is that you have that landowner permission for the project to occur on the land that you're proposing for our program. Another really important point is there's no minimum acreage requirement. In fact, we welcome applications that are pitched in terms of either acres or square feet. So we want to offer you an example, a visual example of an eligible entity project, and it was awarded a Healthy Soil Program grant about this time last year. So it's a grant that's just now wrapping up. So you want to make sure that your video, rather your audio is turned up. And if you're coming to us on kind of a shaky connection this afternoon, know that you will find this video on our website as well. So turn up that audio and we'll show you a nice video here of a current eligible entity project.
This area has been long used for agriculture up to about 1,700 years ago. Before that, it was a pretty vast mosaic of different habitats. As it became developed and as it became peopled, a lot of those areas, especially the wetlands, were either drained or plowed in. How do we take these formerly agricultural lands and restore them to at least some semblance of that former condition? The main objective on this preserve is really for people to learn about nature, to learn about the ecosystem, to learn about the natural history and the impacts and ability to steward this area as well. Often there's not a lot of capacity to do some of these projects in the community to really help steward soil and help with that technical assistance for farmers. The Healthy Soil Program has really benefited CDOT Soil and Water Conservation District because it allows us that funding that we desperately need in terms of reaching out and providing that assistance to our community and constituents. The Healthy Soil Program has provided us with native plants that we need for restoration activity. In the last year, we have planted 800 native species in one of our fields. This project, for me, really informs on that conservation approach and starts to actively transform agricultural fields that have been heavily degraded into native habitat. And I think that's a really remarkable thing that is not only happening here, but is happening worldwide. So we're part of a larger whole, and this restoration project is interconnected to all of those pieces. So for me, that's an amazing thing to be part of and to also pioneer as we're trying some new approaches to get some of these formerly abundant habitats back into the Middle Rio Grande Valley.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that video. Again, that the eligible entity spotlighted there was CUDAD Soil and Water Conservation District. You probably keyed in on the barrier that they were laying down, maybe some of the mulching products they were using, the fact that native plants are really at the heart and center of their project, and that they incorporated volunteers into the implementation of the project. So some really good ideas to key in on there. Next, I want to turn it over to Dean as the technical expert within NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. He's going to walk us through the particular steps that eligible entities should take in order to produce their own successful grant applications. Dean?
Okay, thank you, Katie. And again, I'm going to just start in here in what I think and what Katie and I have discussed that is probably the most logical step process for you as an eligible entity to begin to develop a healthy soil program grant application. So one of the first things that that you as an eligible entity should begin to look at is to identify the priority soil health related resource concerns within your entire jurisdiction. So you know, whatever area your eligible entity may cover and advise or manage or lease land within, we encourage you to take a look at the overall area and identify those resource concerns. So, you know, some of you that may have never heard that term before, as far as a resource concern, this is USDA's definition of a resource concern. It's a natural resource concern is an expected degradation of soil, water, air, plant, or animal resource base to an extent the sustainability or intended use of the resource concern is impaired. I know that's a mouthful, but basically, the easiest way to think about a resource concern is it's an issue specifically related to soil that inhibits its capacity to function the way you would like it to, whether it be cropland, rangeland, forest land, market garden, etc. For the Healthy Soil Program, some of the resource concerns that you may come across as you are, you know, kind of taking a look at your entire jurisdiction, erosion. This could be both soil erosion through wind, water erosion. We have compaction, organic matter depletion, concentration of salts or other chemicals that may exist, loss or degradation of soil organism habitat, aggregate stability, which could include poor soil structure. So these are the overarching resource concerns that that you may identify that exist within your jurisdiction. And so that would be step one. And so step two, as Katie changes the slide, is where you're going to decide as an eligible entity which of those soil health related resource concerns that you want to address with your project. So you may have 5 or 6 predominant soil health related resource concerns within your jurisdiction, but for the purpose of your project, you may only want to focus on one or two of those. So as an eligible entity, there's a number of ways that you can make that decision. You can consult with your eligible entity leadership, which this could be the tribal governor, the mayor domo, land grant president, SWCD board, extension leadership, etc. You may want to consult with the local land managers within your jurisdiction, because those are the individuals that are operating the land, that see the land on a daily basis, and so you may want to consult with those. We encourage you to consult with technical experts such as those at USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. They are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to identification and mitigation of soil health related resource concerns. But then we also encourage you to consult with our own Healthy Soil Program team. We can help kind of guide your direction as far as where you want to take your project. So you've identified those big overarching resource concerns. Now you've narrowed it down to maybe one or two resource concerns that you want to address with your project. So we'll move on to the next step. I kind of got ahead of myself. We mentioned the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is also a partner with NMDA on the Healthy Soil Program. They provide us with technical expertise. You'll notice that there are 35 USDA service centers located across the state. They provide service to every county within the state. When you have access to this slide later on, you can use this slide to find the local USDA service center that serves the area that you're located in. So that just allows you to find that local NRCS office that can provide you with some technical expertise on identifying and mitigating those resource concerns. So next slide, please. Okay, so to step 3, this is where you as an eligible entity, where you are going to decide the location or locations where your project will happen. So the Healthy Soil Program projects implemented by eligible entities must include an on-the-ground soil health improving practice or practices. So you have to include, like Secretary Whitty was mentioning earlier, we want those boots on the ground. We want this particular Healthy Soil Program funding to include on-the-ground projects. Your project that you're going to create can also, but is not required to include an educational or outreach component. So if you choose as an eligible entity to include an educational or outreach component, that's great. You're not required to, but it can also complement the on-the-ground soil health improving practices that you're implementing. Some of the things you might want to think about when you're deciding the location that your project is going to happen. Will the project happen on land that the eligible entity owns, maybe leases, manages, or advises on? And so that'll help guide your process. Will you implement this project on a local landowner's land? That's a question you may want to ask. And then will the project happen on land that another governmental entity owns, such as a city or maybe a county open space area? And so these are some of the things that you want to kind of bounce around within your eligible entity leadership to decide where your specific project is going to occur. And it could occur on multiple locations throughout your eligible entity, or it could occur on one specific location that you've targeted as needing soil health improvement practices. So you've identified those resource concerns. You've narrowed it down to maybe one or two or three that you want to address. Now you've decided upon your location, and so we'll guide you through the next final step as you begin to develop your project. Again, Katie brought this slide up earlier, and we just want to bring it back in front of you because we want to help you understand where these Healthy Soil Program projects can occur. They can occur on cropland, rangeland, forest land, orchards, market gardens, community gardens, subsistence gardens. The only thing that we require is that these projects occur where there's an existing relationship between the eligible entity and the land. And again, this could be that the eligible entity owns the land, they may lease the land, they may manage the land on another party's behalf, or the eligible entity advises those who do manage the land. So in other words, the eligible entity must have landowner permission to implement a healthy soil program project on the land that it does not own. And again, there's no minimum acreage requirement. You can submit your project in both acres or square feet. So next slide, please. And the final step when you're developing the basis of your project is to put the soil health principles at the heart of your project. And so you're going to use the soil health principles that are identified in the Soil Health Act to determine the practices that will best address your soil health related resource concerns. So you may be asking yourself, what are those soil health principles? We're gonna get to those in the next slide. So these are the 5 soil health principles that are identified in the Soil Health Act that is responsible for NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. And the one thing you need to understand about these soil health principles is these are not practices within themselves, but they are guiding principles to help you determine the best approach to improve your soil health. The first soil health principle is keeping soil covered. The second is minimizing soil disturbance on cropland and minimizing external inputs. The third is maximizing biodiversity. The fourth is maintaining a living root. And the fifth is integrating animals into land management, including grazing animals, birds, beneficial insects, or keystone species such as earthworms. You'll notice all 5 of these soil health principles, they're not specifically something that you're going to do, but they will guide you in a direction to go once you've identified your resource concerns. These soil health principles will help you move in a direction of actually creating a project. One thing you'll find out is it's almost impossible to select one and only one soil health principle. However, your project must address at least one, but you're going to find as you're developing your project, looking through the resource concerns, that these have a definite chance to overlap within your project. But in order to apply, you must address at least one of the soil health principles listed on the screen before you. So next slide, please. So once you've kind of taken a look at your resource concerns, you've narrowed your focus on a few resource concerns that you feel as an eligible entity is going to impact your constituents the most. You've taken a look at those soil health principles. We have created at NMDA with cooperation from NRCS what we call our resource concern guide sheets. These are designed to help you decide how to improve your soil health related resource concerns that you've identified. One item of note, these resource concern guide sheets are not something that you as an eligible entity have to fill out and submit. They are simply a tool to give you a starting point for your project idea. These resource concern guide sheets will show you the relationship between your soil health related resource concerns that you identified, the soil health principles that are listed as part of the program, as well as the agricultural or conservation practices that you can use to address those resource concerns. At the tail end of this presentation today, we'll give you an up close and personal view of these resource concern guide sheets, so you can actually see kind of what they have on them. We'll note that they are included on our website. You can download them and print them for discussion and project decision purposes later on. So, but these are simply a tool that can assist you as an eligible entity in focusing the your project on maybe specific practices to address those resource concerns that you've identified. So next slide, please. Now you may be asking yourself, what are some of the things that have been done in the past with the Healthy Soil Program? So you'll notice on your screen, we just have a few snapshots of some of the things that Healthy Soil Program grantees have completed. Cover cropping is always a popular one. That helps you address multiple resource concerns. Reestablishing native plant species, applying compost and or biochar, establishing pollinator habitat. That's been a popular one as well. You might see projects that include bale grazing, temporary fencing, repairing habitat restoration. There's all these plus many more practices. This is not an all-encompassing list, but we just give this as a sample of things that have been done and can be done and are very beneficial to improving soil health within the lands that you manage or advise on. So just a sampling right here of things that can be done, but in no way a all-encompassing list. Next slide, please. And I think it's at this point that I'm going to turn it back to Katie to kind of help you finish off the process of developing your project.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. And I'm sure everyone on the call got a good sense of Dean's technical expertise. He came to NMDA after many years in natural resources management. So a really good mind helping to inform the particulars of NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. So yes, now that you have your project idea in mind, how do you get it presented? We recommend sort of this flow of activities. So you're ready to set out, start working on those application documents. Well, what are those documents? First and foremost, think about the timeline of project activities. So Dean walked you through the steps to lead up to that project idea formation. You're going to look at your natural resource concerns, those related to soil health, pick the ones you really want to focus on, pick the where the project will be occurring, and then set to work on the project activities that you have to get done within this coming year in order to fully implement that project. So you want to start by laying out the timeline of project activities. We have some good questions posted on our website on the webpage for eligible entities. These are just a couple of questions there, but we want to really focus your thinking toward what are the goods and services that your eligible entity will need in order to implement the project and to be successful. And then, of course, we want to know, what do those goods and services cost? That's where the rubber meets the road for us, is where the budget and the timeline intersect. You'll see that in our application, one of our application documents. And then, of course, where you run into questions within this month-long time frame of applying for a grant as an eligible entity, make sure you go back to our frequently asked questions document. You'll hear us refer to this in shorthand as FAQ. So look at that FAQ. Particularly to help you understand eligible versus ineligible expenses. We hear those questions quite a lot, and so we've created a pretty thorough but not exhaustive list, but a thorough list there within the FAQ to give you a good sense about that aspect of the program as well as many other aspects. Really important that you take a moment to study this slide here. So here we are, middle of April, gathering for what is a month-long application period. We close the window May 17th, 12 o'clock, noon, sharp, okay? These are one-year grant projects, and this is really the time frame in which those project activities must occur. So at the end of the day, after we make the project selections, we notify people, we get eligible entity staff trained up, we get contracts signed. The soonest things can happen within your project is August 1st of this calendar year, 2023. We're operating within the 2024 fiscal year. So we're going to start those activities, your project activities, August 1st of 2023 and go through May 31st of 2024. That gives us here at NMDA that last month of the 2024 fiscal year to wrap up any reporting requirements that are outstanding from the eligible entity, to wrap up any final invoices. That's another thing we'll talk about is the invoicing process here. But the thing to really key in on about this slide is that activities for your project cannot occur any sooner than August 1st. They cannot occur any later than May the 31st. It's a 10-month project. And as I mentioned earlier, we get this question a lot. Well, what can be purchased with Healthy Soil Program funds? So these are just examples. These are broad outlines. Really encourage you to look at our FAQ where you have specific questions. Again, what you'll find there are some good parameters to help you make decisions about what to ask for funding to implement your project. If you look with me on the left-hand side of the screen, we'll focus on what's eligible for consideration first. So we separate our funding categories, into 3 separate categories. We look at non-durable goods, and those, as are illustrated there for you on the screen, those are tangible things that have a short lifespan. And a couple of examples, these are popular examples. Cover crop seed, that's something you can touch, but it's something that doesn't last a whole lot of time. So cover crop seed, a good example of a non-durable good that we would consider for funding. Same story for compost. We also ask you to categorize your funding in terms of durable goods. So again, those are those tangible things. You hear me knocking on a table. Durable goods are things you can touch, but they're things with a longer lifespan. So for these things, it might be hand tools, it might be heavier equipment than that. But the thing to really lock into your mind here is that there's a funding limit, okay? That funding limit is just under $5,000. So if you're looking at requesting funding for a durable good, the first thing we'll look at, A, is it relevant to soil health and to your project? B, as importantly, what is the price tag? The price tag has to be $4,999.99 or beneath that in order for us to even consider it for funding, okay? So we've looked at non-durable goods, durable goods. Now let's shift our thinking to services. And for us, that's the specialized work that is required for the implementation of your project. In my mind, these are words that end in ing. So it's things like testing your soil. It is things like renting equipment. It is things like planting your fields. So that's a good way to think about what you're requesting funding for, how to categorize that expense. Now, if you look with me on the right-hand side of the screen, those items that are ineligible for consideration. And so we, again, categorize non-durable goods, durable goods, and services here. For non-durable goods, the things that we will not consider for Healthy Soil Program funding are those tangible, short-lived items that are like topsoil. The goal is not to replace the soil you got, it's to improve the soil that you have. So topsoil is one of those easy expenses that is ineligible for funding. Same story for cash crop seed. We're here to help you with cover crop seed. And also livestock. We get that question quite a bit, is why we address it on this slide. All things ineligible for funding. As far as those durable goods, again, we go back to that question, what's the price tag? And is it related to soil health? So if that durable good is related to soil health, but it has a price tag of $5,000 or more, it's ineligible for funding consideration. Last but not least, we talk about services. You may hire a consultant to help with your project, but we will cap the funding for that consultant at 10% of the total project funds. You saw earlier that our funding cap is $100,000 per project. If you're putting in for $20,000, a $20,000 project, we'll look at your consulting request and award no more than $2,000. Of course, we would ask other questions. We would want to make sure that that consultant is relevant to the project that you will be implementing. You'll see that note there at the bottom of the screen. Again, we really encourage you to seek out that frequently asked questions document to help see more examples of things that are eligible and ineligible for funding consideration. All right, if you've spent any amount of time on the eligible entity webpage, you would have seen this document, and this is an essential component of your project, maybe the most important. It's the timeline and the budget combined. So what we're looking to see here at NMDA is that you have a clear articulation of your activities by quarter, okay? And that you have associated with those activities durable goods, non-durable goods, services that point directly back to improving soil health. And the reason I really stress this document is because it is central to our contracts here. And anytime we are talking about the Healthy Soil Program, this is the document that we refer back to when we have questions about a particular project. It can also be useful for you as the eligible entity as a quick reference point about what the things are that you should be working on, as well as the goods and the services for which you are approved to spend grant funds, and make sure that you're staying within the constraints that we'll basically agree to within this document. So just pause on that screen for just a moment so you can see what it is that you'll be asked to complete here. It's a pretty detailed document, and we'll walk through a few examples here later on. Okay, so we talked about some of the things that you'll need to complete in order to apply for a grant from our Healthy Soil Program. All of those things, once they're completed, get uploaded to an online application. And so this is the screen that you'll see to know that you're at the right spot. So there at the bottom of the screen in orange is the URL, the website address for the online application. We'll show you that in just a moment as well. You've heard me say this earlier, that our deadline is May 17th at 12 noon Mountain sharp, and we won't accept late applications or incomplete applications. So you want to make sure you're spending some good time being thoughtful about what it is you commit to paper before you press submit at by that deadline, because the software, it will shut down right at noon on May the 17th. Thinking ahead and being optimistic, if your project is selected for a Healthy Soil Program grant, then what? Let me point to you a couple of really important activities coming up for those whose projects are selected for funding. July 10th is when we will gather all of those eligible entities online for a mandatory grantee training. So we'll walk through the specifics of testing your soil. We'll walk through the specifics of invoicing NMDA for reimbursement of grant funds. We'll walk through specifics of reporting on grant progress. Those sorts of topics are what we'll cover. So that's July 10th, and we'll be posting that time shortly. August 31st, if we don't have back the contractual paperwork that really firms up a relationship between NMDA and the eligible entity receiving of funds, the project could be canceled. So I want to note those two really important timeframes that come relatively early within our grant cycle as being very important. And again, more dates laid out within that FAQ on our website. I mentioned that soil testing as a piece of our program. So all of our projects are required to start with soil testing and soil assessment. We make a distinction between those two, and you can follow with me on this screen. We set aside funding. Actually, we'll grant you the funding if you'll make specific within your budget template what it is you're seeking. But NMDA will reimburse you for soil testing on your project site. If you make it plain what it is, the number of sites and the cost per those soil tests. But soil testing it's a service that's performed in a laboratory for a fee. And that's why we grant you funds to get that done. So what we require is that you take pre-project soil samples. It may be just a few, it may be many. You'll have to justify that within your application. But you'll take those samples, bundle them up, ship them off to a lab. And what we're looking for is a chemical analysis at a bare minimum. We require those reports be reported back to us at NMDA so we can kind of establish a baseline soil health assessment statewide. As I mentioned, yes, we will reimburse the cost of that testing. The other thing that we require of our grantees is soil assessment. And this is something that is free and it happens in the field. So we require that you get out both before the project and after the project to basically do a physical analysis. And Dean, this is where his expertise really shines too. So he can describe the sorts of assessment that you would go through. But basically what we're looking for is a physical assessment of the soil on your project site. And again, we ask that you report those results, both pre-project and post-project, to us at NMDA. A little green note hanging off in the corner there that NRCS as well as Extension are really good resources. So where you have questions, they would be really good ones to pick up the phone and call. Another good question we hear often is how are Healthy Soil Program grant funds paid? This is really critical. They are not paid up front, okay? But they are paid on the basis of cost reimbursement. So here's how that plays out. The eligible entity incurs the cost of the approved budget item first, and then you'll create an invoice and provide us the associated receipt showing those zero balances. You'll send those into us at NMDA. You do not have to wait till the end of the grant to do this. In fact, we encourage you just the opposite. We say invoice us early, invoice us often. We say it so often around here, it might as well be a mantra, but we will reimburse your approved project expenses just as frequently as you invoice us for those expenses. So we want to get people in a habit, in a rhythm of invoicing us early and invoicing us often for those approved project activities. So wrapping our arms around all the information you've heard today, it has been quite a lot. Dean walked you through the 4 steps of developing your project idea. That's where you have to start. Don't start with the expenses first, start with your project idea. So just to recap that, you're thinking about those priority soil health related resource concerns across your jurisdiction. Okay, they may be many. That's why our next step is to really focus in on what are the 1, 2, 3 soil health resource concerns that you're really going to try to address with your project. From there, if you're especially dealing with a large piece of land, you want to kind of tighten your focus, decide that particular location or locations within your jurisdiction where the project will take place. And lastly, we ask you to ensure that soil health principles are the heart of your project. From there, you'll decide the practices you'll put on the ground. Once you decide those practices, you'll know the goods and services that you'll request funding in order to implement those practices. So it's a pretty linear fashion we ask you to follow here. You've heard me say the deadline is May 17th, and you'll be working on your online application and uploading those associated documents to that online application. Last but not least, 12 o'clock noon Mountain Time. Again, that's the last moment that you can submit your application. We sure don't want you to wait until that last moment, just building in a cushion of time in case there's a computer crash or you have a last minute question. Give yourself some good time to read back through what it is you intend to submit and to commit your eligible entity to for the next 10 months. That's how long we'll be in relationship with these projects. So the place to go, and I would guess that everyone is pretty well acquainted, you're here today, but the place to go is our Healthy Soil Program webpage. We'll show you that in just a moment. And of course, we've got a subpage there for eligible entities to click through to get more information that's specific to you as an eligible entity. And of course, there we also have linked the application, which is also online. So we'll wrap up with questions in just a moment. I know Dean's probably been keeping an eye on some of the chat questions that have come in through the chat, and we'll get to those and perhaps even answer a few of them as we walk through our documents. But I'll just wrap up by saying that our website is where you'll find everything you need to apply for a grant. Really encourage you to check out that FAQ and get subscribed to our Healthy Soil Program newsletter, because we tend to send out emails on a weekly basis when we're deep in the throes of an application cycle. And of course, reach out to us if you have a question that's not addressed in that FAQ, zip us an email, and that way we have in writing what you're pondering, and you get back in writing something you can hang your hat on. And of course, there's our phone number too, if that's another way to correspond with us. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Well, actually, I'm going to pause my screen here or stop sharing entirely. That's what I'll do, Dean. It'll make my screen a little bit easier to see here. Okay. Everybody's still with us. We appreciate you sticking with us here as I get us over to a couple of other screens we want to show you. And the first of those, as I mentioned, everything's online. So Dean, we're probably at the submittable screen.
Correct.
Okay, great. That's where we're going to wind up. First, I'll take us to the Healthy Soil Program website. So again, chances are you're pretty well acquainted with this web page. After all, you keyed in on this very webinar today. So what you'll want to do is just pay attention to this eligible entity text. If you click through, That will land you at the page to learn about requirements that are specific to you as an eligible entity. Again, we named those parties that qualify as eligible entities. And if you're not one of those parties, you'll want to take a look at other parts of our website. So the the application requirements we mentioned, we've got that online grant application and the combined timeline and budget template. But first, where I want to take us is to a couple of the helpful documents that Dean referenced, and those are our resource concern guide sheets. He mentioned to you, these are not things to submit, and that's why they live under this additional resources part of the page. So this is really to help you generate a project idea. Before you start thinking about expenses, before you start thinking about your project timeline, figure out what your project idea is. And this is a great place to do that. So Dean, I'll click on this cropland guide sheet and ask you to walk us through it, please.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
All right, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And like Katie mentioned, this is simply a tool. It's not something that you have to fill out and turn in with your application materials. But we worked with New Mexico NRCS to develop this based on typical resource concerns that you would see throughout New Mexico. You'll notice there prominently at the top is the soil health principles. We want you to guide your project into those soil health principles. But going into the document, we'll just kind of start with the first one. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but if you as an eligible entity determine that wind erosion is a priority resource concern within your jurisdiction, then you would identify that. You'll take a look at this. It just says the presence of eroding soil, both due to wind, rain, irrigation, water application. So any type of erosion that you're experiencing within your jurisdiction would fit under erosion here. You'll notice in the middle column right there, we have some of the typical agriculture practices that you would utilize on cropland to address wind erosion. We have listed cover crops. We had no-till or reduced-till farming techniques. Field borders, which decrease your wind across your fields. We have mulching. You notice we've only listed about 4 or 5 types of practices that you may utilize. This, again, it's not a comprehensive list of practices that you can use, but is simply to guide you. One thing you'll notice there in parentheses, there's some numbers listed here. These numbers correspond to NRCS practice codes. So if you were to actually click on these are hyperlinked. They will take you to the cover crop information on NRCS New Mexico's website. So if you're interested in understanding how to utilize cover crops, how you can design some cover crop mixes, the letter or the numbers there correspond to a practice code that takes you to the NRCS practice for that specific one. We have listed those for every one of these agriculture practices that you may want to implement with your project, just to give you some additional information as you develop your project on what a cover crop is. How can I put in a cover crop? You know, when may I need to terminate my cover crop? We want you to have the most information possible to develop the best possible project within your jurisdiction. And then moving over to the right, you have the final column. These are the soil health principles that will address or that will tie back to not only your resource concern, but the agriculture practices that you're going to use. So let's just take example, the first one, wind erosion. So you've identified wind erosion as a priority resource concern that you want to address through your project. You're going to use a cover crop to address the wind erosion on cropland within your jurisdiction. You'll notice that ties back to both to 4 of the soil health principles, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have keeping the soil covered. We have minimizing soil disturbance on cropland and minimizing external inputs. We have maximizing biodiversity, and then maintaining a living root. So if you use a multi-species cover crop and you no-till that cover crop in, you are addressing 4 of the 5 soil health principles. And so that's just to give you an overview of how this particular document works. Again, we just want to provide you with the most information possible to help you develop the best possible project for your constituents within your jurisdiction. And this is one of those documents that's going to help guide you through developing a project. And again, we worked within NRCS New Mexico to select the most predominant resource concerns that exist in New Mexico. Again, this is not a complete list. There could be practices and resource concerns that don't occur on this list, but if that's the case, we encourage you to visit with NRCS, to visit with New Mexico State University Cooperative Extension Service, and seek out those things. But we feel this is going to be an excellent resource document for you as an eligible entity as you develop your project. So I'm not going to go through the rangeland one. It's very, very similar. And so you can use it exactly how you use the cropland one. But you'll notice it's very similar format. We have the resource concerns on the left. There in the center, you have the agriculture practices that you might utilize, and then the soil health principles that correspond to those practices. And so a very similar document, also hyperlinked to the NRCS practice codes, so you can get it and additional information on how to implement those and some things like that. So again, if you have questions specific to this, be sure and type them in the chat. But again, I'm not going to go through the full rangeland one, but very similar documents, and we encourage you as an eligible entity to print these off and have them handy when you're going through your project development stage.
Great, thank you, Dean. And notice where again that lives. That's on the additional resources page for our eligible entity requirements. That's also where that FAQ resides. And I mentioned that quite a few times as we were going through our slides. Let me take us now over to our combined timeline and budget template. All right. So this is one of those documents that lives on that website. You'll download it as I'm about to do, and you'll complete it after you've figured out what's your project idea. Those were all those good steps that Dean walked us through earlier. So once you've identified your project idea, you've thought through your timeline of activities, you've thought through some of the things that you want to buy, some of the goods and services utilizing grant funding, this is the place to document those activities and those associated expenses. Okay, first thing you'll see is a button to download the file. Don't work on it on the internet. Download it, save it, work on it on your computer, as I'm about to do here. So I am going to open that file. And that will ask me to switch screens here. So if you'll hang with me for just a moment. Okay. Dean, are we looking at an Excel spreadsheet?
No, we're still on the browser. It hasn't swapped over yet.
Okay. Now I see where we're stuck. Still on the browser?
Correct.
Okay. They all look so similar when you're in the pilot seat. So let me try this one last time here.
You're on the Excel spreadsheet now.
All right, just where I want to be. So this is what you'll see when you first pop open the timeline and budget template. Make sure that you've clicked enable editing. Otherwise, you can't work within this document. So first steps first, I want to enable editing. And there we are. This first tab is just directions for you as eligible entities. And again, we offer a link back to the page where all of the supplementary information resides. But here we offer just some quick reminders to check out those eligible versus ineligible expenses on the FAQ. to utilize this template in being specific, but also brief, and to go through this template chronologically. Again, we're thinking about your timeline of activities and the expenses associated with them. So once you get all of this work done, you've got a completed timeline and budget template, you're ready to upload it where noted in the online application. That's our next stop. But first, click over to the second tab. And again, you saw this already, and you saw that it is very thorough. It's very detailed. Don't start over here on the right side of the screen, even though you're ready to be thinking about expenses. Come over here and tell us what you're up to. What are those project activities that have to happen in a certain order in order for your project to happen? So Dean and I will walk through just a few examples here. You'll notice, as we said earlier, it's required that soil testing is the thing that kicks off your project. That's the first thing you ought to be invoicing us for. So let's just walk through this one example. Soil testing. So it's not a non-durable good. It's not a durable good. It is a service. It is something you are going to pay someone else to do. It is a specialized bit of work that has to be performed. So you'll notice that in the template, we name the service. It is soil testing. Then we ask for the name of the business or the staff position performing the service. Who's going to be collecting dollars from you in order to do the service? So Dean, I'll just ask you for an example of a soil testing lab, please.
Okay, for a soil testing lab, for this example, let's just use Ward Labs in Kearney, Nebraska.
Okay. Whoops. I will just come back in here. None of this stuff is locked until you lock it by saving it. So Dean, if you had maybe 5 different soil types represented across your project site, might that be 5 different soil tests you would conduct?
It could be, and so I think for this example, let's say that you have considerably different soil types. Like Katie said, you've got 5 different soil types that exist within that particular unit that you're going to treat. So let's do 5 soil samples.
Okay, so 5, we'll be doing 5 soil tests. Now we're going to ask you the all-important question: what does each one of those tests cost?
And so if you look up the the current basic soil test from Ward Labs, it's at $52 each.
$52 per test. Okay. And you'll notice that this template is programmed to calculate your line item totals for you. So you don't want to mess with these columns, the line item totals. Those are already programmed. You don't have to do the math. Your work is to figure out what is the good, what is the service, where are you going to buy those things, and what do they cost? One thing you'll want to note up here, this is a really important note, that where you will be charged tax, where you will be charged shipping, build that into your per unit cost, okay? Because what we're going to operate from, if your project is successful, is this very document. This is what we're going to hold all parties to once we've got a contract in place. This is where we all must agree. All right, so we've got soil testing happening in this particular lab. We'll be doing 5 soil tests at $52 a pop, rendering us with a total of $260 in that one service. And you'll notice that helps to populate the rest of this document as well. Let me go back over and we'll do one other line item here, Dean, and just in the interest of time, maybe move ahead to other parts of our presentation and take some questions as well. So,
okay, perfect. Let's just kind of assume that your eligible entity is going to purchase cover crop seed to provide to your constituents within the first quarter. So that'll be a fall cover crop, but it's going to occur in the first quarter. And like Katie mentioned, you want to identify those things that are going to occur in each quarter. So as you go through this timeline, you're going to identify the things that are going to happen within the first, second, and third quarter. So in the first quarter, the next brief description that you'll notice right there is we are going to, as an eligible entity, we're going to purchase cover crop seed.
okay. What column would
And
this
so,
go in?
oh, go ahead.
Oh, excuse me. What column would this go in? Service, durable good, non-durable good?
This one will be a non-durable good, like Katie mentioned earlier. This is something that has a very short lifespan. You are going to purchase it and plant it. And so it would be it would fall under the category of a non-durable good. And so the name of the non-durable good, you'll notice we are going to try to be as descriptive as possible in this this particular box. And for today, we're just going to go with we're going to do a winter wheat and field pea mix for the fall. Now you'll notice the one thing did not list in there is the number of pounds that we're going to purchase or the percentages. So Katie, if you'll jump back in that box, and we're going to have a mix, and it's going to be 85% winter wheat. And this may complicate things. I don't know if this is the best way to do it. And then field peas, the remaining 15%. Now you can do this way, or you can list specific pounds of each within that mix. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to have a mix that we're going to order that's going to be 85% winter wheat, 15% field peas, and we are going to purchase, let's just say 100 pounds of this product. And so like Katie did, you put your units, we're going to purchase 100, your unit of measurement, whether it's pounds, cubic yards, tons, etc. For this example, it's going to be pounds. And the next is where you put your cost per unit. So let's be extremely positive and say that this mix is going to cost $9 per pound. And then it totals it up for you. And so you will do that with each individual element of your project, including maybe elements that that don't have a cost associated, but are critical to your project. You would include them as an element of your project, you know, maybe that doesn't have a cost associated, but just to allow us to know what's going on. But primarily, we want those costs and the items that are associated with your project listed out by a quarter basis and as descriptive as possible within those boxes. So I don't know, Katie, if we want to add anything else in here or move on with our presentation, because I know we're kind of sneaking up on the end.
No, I think these are really great examples. So again, just illustrating that you start on the left with your timeline of activities, noting when things will happen, what it is you're up to, and then tell us about the things that you're requesting grant funding for. This is the place to document those requested purchases alone. We'll show you in the online application where you will demonstrate your own contributions to the project.
Katie, a really important question just came in, and I think we can address it.
Sure.
It talks about the paying for the planting of a cover crop. And so I'll let you describe the process they would go through in identifying the service that they're going to have when they pay for planting a cover crop, because this is a very important aspect of the budget and timeline template.
Sure. What I might do in that case is just adjust this title of this activity and call it planting a cover crop seed. So I'm going to document that in order to plant the cover crop seed, I've got to buy the cover crop seed. So that would be the non-durable good associated with that activity. If you're going to plant it, you might document that over here. Name of the service would be planting cover crop seed. You might even put in here, Dean, would this be helpful to say on what fields, if there's a particular location that's being treated and not another?
Yes, if there's a specific location that will be receiving this this mix at this particular time of the year, I would identify it. Again, just be as descriptive as possible with each of these elements of your budget and timeline.
Okay, so the next question, of course, once we've named that service, is going to be the name of the staff position or the business that you're hiring in order to perform that service. So, let's see. It could be, I guess, some on-staff labor. And so we would put the name of the staff position. What might be a good staff position that would help accomplish that task, Dean, of planting a cover crop seed?
This one might be like a farm labor position. That might be the easiest description.
Okay. How long do you think it would take to plant 100 pounds?
Let's go with about 4 hours.
4 hours. Can you guess a going rate after I put in the units? We've got 4 hours at how much per hour?
$20 an hour.
$20 an hour. Okay, so we can see that that calculates out to $80 for that service. And that service, of course, is related to this one activity. So this one activity has a couple of requested expenses associated with it. If you're planting a cover crop seed and you're requesting cover crop seed, you'll document that under non-durable goods. And if you're requesting funding for that service of actually getting the seed in the ground, this is where you'll document that service. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward for an example. All right. Last thing but not least is you'll want to come up here. Make sure you save this document to your computer. You don't want to upload something that you've worked so hard on that we receive on our end as being totally blank. So make sure this document lives on your computer, that you save it. Because again, if everything is approved, this will be the document that we all need to be referring to guide us in the timeline of activities and also the associated expenses. Okay, Dean, I think I'll take us back to that eligible entity requirement webpage so that we can check out the grant application itself. All right, hopefully that's following me over.
Correct, you're there.
Super. So again, we've checked out the timeline and budget. We have talked about the FAQ. I'll show you that in a moment too. Dean walked us through those guide sheets. A lot of people want to know, where do I find that grant application? It lives right here. So we'll click on over. And because at this very moment, here we are, April 18th, we've got a couple of things that end this Friday. Don't let these confuse you, because you're right here. You're an eligible entity. If you're here as a pueblo, a tribe, a nation, an acequia, a district, extension, all those different local governmental parties, you want to make sure that you're applying through this portal, eligible entities. Let me check out those guidelines really quick. This is the information that you'll see right here. And it just reminds you of the project time frame. Okay. And it reminds you of how eligible entities are defined for our program. And of course, we link back to the website so that you can get more information. I know you're not ready to hit submit, but eventually you will be. Hit that submit button and that will get you started. Okay. And once you answer a basic question for eligibility, which is basically just attesting to the fact that you represent one of those local governmental entities, an actual eligible entity, then you'll jump straight into the application. And I want to just show you the straightforward nature of some of these questions. So of course, we want to know where the project site is located. We may ask you for a physical address if you will have one to offer. It may be easier for you to name the location in terms of latitude and longitude, or township, range, and section, those old-fashioned terms. We mentioned to you that there's no minimum acreage to participate, and that we are willing to consider projects, whether they come to us in terms of acres or square feet. So you have that option. Okay, just giving you a sense of the basic questions here. But let me jump ahead a bit. We'll ask you about agricultural production occurring on those lands and what the current management practices are. This is a really important question to help us really get a sense. And when I say us, I mean our reviewers and us here at NMDA, a good sense of what's going on the land at present. You'll tell us about your organization just a bit and the name. And you want to be clear about who the project lead is. You'll notice a bit of text here. What we ask for, this may not be the person who's out in the field every day. What we really want to know is who should be our primary point of contact, because there may be questions that you have about reporting or about invoicing. There may be questions that we at NMDA have about invoicing or reporting. We want to make sure that we have a good primary point of contact so that the two bodies can interface well. basic contact information so that we can remain in good contact for the 10-month grant. Okay, we'll ask you a question about who it is your eligible entity serves. This is an optional question, but there may be something you wish to tell us about the communities that you serve, and this would be the place to help to document that and give us a sense of who all resides within your jurisdiction who could potentially benefit from this project. What we're looking for with our project summary is something that is very pithy, very short, and touches on in very few words what the amount of land is where the project is happening, what it is you're attempting to address in terms of those soil health resource concerns, what the land type is, and the practices that you'll be implementing, because this is something that we'll use in the marketing and advertising of our program. We talked a lot today about resource concerns and the soil health principles to address those concerns. So this is really where we get into the nitty-gritty of what is your project all about. It's possible your eligible entity will request funds to do bale grazing. More information about that in our FAQ. But if you're doing bale grazing, you'll want to upload the appropriate documents here. And don't forget those images of your project site. That'll give our reviewers a really strong visual sense of where your project is going to occur and what it will attempt to remedy. A lot of you have communities that you want to reach out to through education and outreach activities. You'll want to document those here, not forgetting to name your target audience and what it is you'll be communicating to that audience. Spend some good time on your project narrative, just detailing the various components of your project, giving us a good sense, not too technical a sense, but something that a general audience could access as well, so that people have a good understanding of what it is you're attempting to do. We talked about that soil testing requirement, and this is where you'll document that approach. But surely you'll be using other techniques to evaluate the success of your project, so you'll document those. What you hope to be your project outcomes, agriculturally speaking, economically speaking, socially speaking. We spent a fair amount of time covering the timeline and budget template, and the reason for that is it's worth 40 points, and it is the primary document that we reference at NMDA and that you should be referencing at your eligible entity as the grant unfolds, because that's where you know your timeline of activities plus those goods and services that help to implement those activities. So spend some good time on that document and upload it here. Your final dollar amount should not be higher than this, assuming I've got the right number of zeros, but we talked about $100,000 being the upper limit of what you can request. And this is a very abbreviated, abridged way to document what it is that the eligible entity is putting into the success of its own project. For a lot of eligible entities, for a lot of grantees, more than anything, what that is your time. It's your labor. What is it that you're contributing to see your own grant through in a successful way? But maybe you have some leftover seed. Maybe you've got some fuel to go into your farm equipment that you'll be contributing, because that's one of our ineligible expenses. So that's another good way to think about your matching is what are those ineligible expenses that you think are still necessary to the project? Great place to document them is right here in your matching budget. Okay, you'll tell us that total value. All right, we explained something really important here, so I just want to put an exclamation point on it, that partial funding is a possibility here. So we want you to help us understand how it is the project could be scaled back if in fact only partial funds are available to your project. And those other supporting documents in furtherance of your project ideas. And just acknowledgement that photos and other related items will be used in promotion of the program. Last but not least, attest that you've put forward true and correct information, that you've reviewed it, and you're ready to hit submit by May the 17th at noon. So with that, Dean, I'll stop sharing the screen and we can spend this last bit of time together answering questions and going through what parts of the chat might not have been addressed already.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a whole lot of questions come through the chat. I think the last one, Katie, I'll go ahead and read this. because I think this is a good question that'd be good to address. Can an entity purchase, for example, a grain or a seed drill at a higher cost than $4,999 and bill only $4,999 to the HSP grant? This would essentially be cost sharing on a big ticket item with the help of NMDA.
Bottom line for us is that we cannot put forward any more than that limit stated there on the purchase of any piece of equipment. So in other words, could you cost share it? Yes. But what you'll build into your budget template is only what you're seeking project funds for. So if that budget template comes to us for a $50,000 piece of equipment, of course, we're going to interpret that as, oh my gosh, they are asking for $50,000 worth of grant funding to purchase this piece of equipment. Automatic no. So only what it is you're requesting grant funds to purchase. That's what we want to see built into that requested budget template. Hopefully that makes sense. But Dean, you might want to build on that.
No, I don't think I can add anything to that. Hope that answers your question. We had one other question about the 10% consulting cap. Does it apply to individual applicants as well? And the answer to that is yes.
Yes, and I see another question from another individual applicant on the call. So just making sure all the information you've heard today is very specific to eligible entities. If you're here applying on behalf of yourself as an individual, a company, a nonprofit, go to our website, check out those specific documents to individual applicants. So not necessarily what you've heard today applies to you. We've got 2 different applicant types, 2 different cycles, 2 different sets of restrictions based on, again, the nature of the applicant. So what we've provided today is very, very particular to those local governmental entities that work on lands in some form or fashion. So I'll pull up the chat and help you kind of wade through here, Dean, just in the interest of time. Okay. And again, we invite people, if you want to raise your hand, and we'll invite you to unmute and ask your question out loud, recognizing that some questions just translate best in real time.
And always remember, if for some reason a question comes to you later this afternoon, feel free to use that HSP email that Katie showed earlier, and send your questions via the HSP email. If for some reason you gotta kind of have to digest all the information right now and a question comes to you, feel free to use that email as well.
Right, and I'll just drop that information in the chat. So again, we've got a couple of different applicant types. This is the starting point, no matter what applicant type you fit. So you'll hear me typing a bit, and I apologize for that. Okay. And there you have it, some contact information so that you can access yourself good information no matter your applicant type, but also send us an email where you have a question that's not in the FAQ. And a lot of the questions we tend to receive are addressed in that FAQ, so make sure you stop off there first.
Katie, I see an easy question based on the timeline. It says, when will the awarded grants be announced, and when will they be notified?
That is a good question, Christy. Our tentative timeframe is the end of June, such that you would have enough time to make sure your calendar is arranged appropriately for our mandatory trainings on July the 10th. And we'll be setting those timeframes in stone very soon and notifying all applicants of that, successful or unsuccessful. That way you can start building your calendar out.
There's a question from Dorothy Duff, and I believe this may be an individual applicant question, but I would recommend contacting your SWCD as soon as possible to have everything in. If you are an individual applicant, to have everything in by this Friday at noon. So I would recommend contacting them as quick as possible.
Yes. And Dorothy, I'll just tag on to your response here. If I can figure out a way, I'm going to drop in the chat for you, the page that's specific for individual applicants. Again, everything we've talked about today is not for individual applicants, it's for those eligible entities. So you'll want to check out that web page I just dropped in the chat for you. And yes, and Dean made a good point about the application window closing this Friday. So one last call out for anyone who wants to raise their hand and unmute and ask a question about the eligible entity process in real time here.
I've got a quick question.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I understand that Cooperative Extension Service is a eligible entity. Does this also apply to the NMSU Ag Science Centers?
You know, we've worked with the Ag Science Centers before in a couple of different ways. They're definitely a partner for us in the research that we are funding through the Healthy Soil Program. We ask that you team up, that there's an extension component, since that is true to the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can partner with someone in extension to put forth that proposal, that's the manner that we would encourage you to do so.
Okay, perfect. No, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Any other questions here? Dorothy, recognizing you have a question for an individual applicant, let me just see if one more time if there are eligible entity questions here, given that that's our narrow focus this afternoon. Okay. And we're ready to take your question, Dorothy, if you still have it. Okay. See that your hand is lowered, so we'll just watch for an email to come to you. And again, that's an invitation for all parties on the call today. Where you have a question, seek out those FAQ documents first, then reach out to us at our HSP email address, and we will go from there. Again, if you're here as an individual applicant, we're watching for your materials coming in by this Friday at noon. Eligible entities, those are our pueblos, our tribes, our nations, acequias, land grants, extension, those soil and water conservation districts, and any other local governmental entity working on land in New Mexico. You've got until May 17th. Be sure to check out the information at our website and be in touch with your questions, the ones you don't find addressed in our FAQ. We'd love to help you walk through your project ideas and submit the best project proposals possible. Dean, I'll leave it to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone's time and attendance this afternoon. And again, if you have any questions related to eligible entity projects and trying to identify or develop a project, feel free to send it to that HSP email. And again, we thank you for your time and attendance, and we hope to see some good quality projects submitted later on in May. So.
Indeed. Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care.